by reading from our script for remotely conducted meetings as a preliminary matter. And of course, after I conclude this, and I think you all by now are aware of the fact that I can't hear anything from what you folks are saying, unfortunately. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ray Pohl, Chairman of the Nantucket Historic District Commission. Oh boy. See, I won't be able to do roll call because I won't be able to hear you folks say aye.
Holly, would you want me to do
Holly,
roll call?
listen, I'm sorry. I seriously, I'm going to call you up and I'm going to mute myself because I don't want everybody hearing this.
But are we all muted? No.
I think it's just Ray.
Abby, if you could do roll call, that would be great.
Yeah. So for the HDC, let's see, who do we have? Diane Coombs.
Here.
I don't think we have anybody else.
Abby, I'm here. It's Carrie.
Oh, Carrie, hi. Okay.
Wow.
Okay, thank you. And myself, is anybody else from the HDC here?
I'm here, Abby.
Oh,
Connie.
Connie, great. Thank you, Connie, and myself. So we have 4 members of the HDC here. Connie, Carrie, Diane, and myself, Abby Camp.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll pass it over to, I think Ray's going to try to zoom back in. Pass it over to Angus.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Holly, and thank you all for being here. I am going to, this is Angus McLeod, Chair of the Nantucket Historical Commission, and I will take a roll call of the commissioners present. Abby Dimonino.
Here.
Thank you. Clement Durkis.
Here.
Thank you. George Raisman.
Here. Here.
Thank you, Tom.
Here.
Thanks. And we had Mickey. I think we lost Mickey. So hopefully he'll be able to join. And I think that concludes our roll call. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, sorry for the late announcement, but welcome everybody to our annual CLG meeting. This meeting is a requirement of our MOU, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, as a CLG, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for you all as commissioners from both the legislative body, the HDC, and our preservation planning body, the NHC, to come together collaboratively for the benefit of our local and national historic landmark. It's very exciting. Although this meeting is a requirement of our signed MOU with MHC, I will note that we may meet more than once a year, of course, but this will satisfy our end of our fiscal year of 2022. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. This meeting is for you all, the commissioners, to share a collaborative, healthy dialogue with one another for the benefit of those who may have been not know, and this might be your first CLG meeting as a commissioner. We, the town of Nantucket, through the Massachusetts Historical Commission, were accepted into the National Park Services program as a certified local government on March 19th, 2021. And that is why we are here today. The HDC and the NHC act as the town's local CLG together. And with this program, we are eligible for grants from the National Park Service under the National Historic Preservation Fund. We have a stronger role in nominating properties to the National Register individually if necessary. However, everything in the NHL district is already on the National Register as contributing or non-contributing because the entire island is a district. And an increased technical assistance from MHC and the National Park Service. And of course, an official acknowledgement of the town of Nantucket's commitment to historic preservation planning. Something that obviously was started way before the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, back when 1955, where the special act was enacted to create our local districts. Also, it's important to note that the historic preservation is outlined in the Select Board's strategic plan and the town sustainability planning initiatives. This expands the ongoing preservation planning initiatives that started with the creation of the historic district in 55, as well as the passing of the CPC over 20 years ago. I was probably the only high school student championing for CPC. All of this to say that we are part of the federal preservation program. This partnership provides the opportunity to help preserve, protect, and increase awareness in our unique cultural heritage. This includes other organizations as well, like the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, Preserve America, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and the National Main Street Center program. Preservation through a public and private partnership, which also includes our local nonprofits like NPT, NHA, Preservation Institute Nantucket, Sconset Trust. So thank you. Today, we are also fortunate to have a couple of speakers. I want to take this time to thank them. I believe you all will benefit greatly from these presentations. And of course, I urge you to ask your questions after their respective presentations are done. I also want to point out upcoming events, which was listed on page 4 of your agenda. These include a Mass DEP webinar, the start of the 2023 PIN summer program, the CPC Streetscapes presentation, which was a joint PIN and NPT program, which I believe both commissions will be very appreciative on that endeavor. And of course, our independent review that we're going to be having in with NAPC, which they'll be on island in October. So of course, for a CLG recap, this is we had our first CLG meeting in November of 2021. And although the CLG met again in 2021 of December, the minutes are for you to review are from November. Now I'll pass it over to both the HDC chair and the NHC chair respectively to request an approval of the minutes.
Probably in the agenda, HTC is going first. Is there still technical difficulty, or should I go first, or what works best?
It looks like Ray's frozen. So maybe NHC, you can go first, and I can bring up the minutes.
Thank you. Did you get my email? I sent it probably a half hour ago with proposed changes to it.
Yes.
Okay, so oh, I see. I don't need the sound now.
We hear you, Ray.
Okay, well, that's good. So I'm doing a hybrid. I got my phone in my hand and I can see you, Holly, nobody else.
Wow.
Okay, so sorry. Where are we? If somebody could just seriously, briefly bring me up to speed, and then I will.
Yes, so right now we are at the approval of the November 2021 CLG minutes. I just had a draft up onto the screen, but I took it off.
Okay.
So basically, the way we have it on the agenda is HDC would motion to approve and NHC would then motion to approve. I will say that Angus, as chair of NHC, provided an email with some edits, so I put that up on the screen. And maybe Angus, if you wanted to run through your proposed changes.
Sure. So in the first meeting, you said some really good things, and they fit in between in your very first quoted statement between responsibilities as a CLG and before consultants will be on November 14th. Would be to insert the HDC will continue to be responsible for enforcement of local preservation as they have been since 1955 under the Special Act. NHC will continue to manage the National Register and the community-wide survey. Together, NHC and HDC are a certified local government. It is a joint partnership responsible for preservation under the Nantucket Special Act and the Massachusetts General Law.
Angus,
Yes,
can I ask a question?
of course.
Thank you. Is everything that you're reading in the transcript? I mean, or is this being added? Is this ex post facto addition of information that was not actually said at the meeting?
This is what was said at the meeting, and I thought
Like
it was
literally,
to include.
literally.
Yes,
Okay. So Holly, and you would agree with that, right?
I have not reviewed. These are minutes, so let me back up. These minutes were done by our former minutes taker for the town, Terry Norton, who's obviously since retired.
Well, I want to be clear on this point because the purpose of minutes is to provide a written record of what was said at a meeting. And so it's not to provide new information or anything like
Correct.
that. So I just want to be completely clear
Correct.
that if we're adding something to the minutes, it's by way of clarification of something that was already stated. Just want to make sure of that.
Correct.
that's
Um,
correct.
So
And it-
Angus, sorry, continue.
So the last bit getting added in the middle of the first statement from Holly is the survey of historic structures will be completed according to MHC standards and will be accessible to the public. And then it just continues with the consultants will be on island November 14th through 16th. The other thing to where it's struck in number 2 after report instead of what's there, it would be, and that was said, but it wasn't as important as this message, which is the quote begins regarding the National Register of Historic Places and the list of contributing structures. The determination about that list is ultimately made by the Park Service. But as a CLG, we have the ability to make recommendations to the Park Service.
okay.
And
Okay.
the last edit, I'm sorry, that was in the first section where it's crossed out at report. And then the last part is at number 2, where it's crossed out for report. Nantucket is a living, evolving historic community, and these two commissions together are responsible for its preservation. We have distinct but overlapping responsibilities. Our hope for this meeting is that both of our commissions leave with a clear understanding of what we each do, the areas of shared work and overlap, and identify some goals that we might work together towards together. And those are the amendments I'd like to make to the minutes.
Okay. So thank you, Angus. Now, go ahead.
Do I, Holly, what's the best procedural thing? Do I get, do I do something with my board?
Yes,
Can I,
but it's a
sorry,
little.
can I ask
yeah.
a question?
Absolutely.
Holly, okay, so I'm extremely sorry for the technical difficulties that had me coming in so late to the party. Very, very apologetic about that. Holly, when I did get on, did you say that there was a motion from the HDC to approve the minutes as submitted?
Yes. So in
Yes.
yes, so our meeting posting on the agenda includes that section for you to make a motion for your board to accept the minutes, and then for Angus to have the historical commission move it. However, I'm just, with the changes that were just sent in, I'm wondering if this is something we need to, I don't know, handle a little bit differently.
Well,
But that's up to you.
my own opinion, and listen, we're really talking about minutes here,
Correct.
whether or not we agree or disagree with the language. But the point that I'm making, the point that I'm trying to make, is that minutes. Hopefully, we all agree that minutes of a meeting are a written record of what was said.
Correct.
Right.
Not verbatim.
So, yeah. I for one haven't had a chance to review the language that Angus has just read. So my own personal view is I'd be in favor of actually like not approving the minutes at the moment, just so that we can have a chance to verify the accuracy. That's all.
And Mr. Chair, I would agree with that. And I think procedurally, it might be best for each respective board. I don't think this would be a problem, because you all act and vote on your stuff individually, but jointly, where
Right.
you could hold them if you all wish, and have them on your respective agenda. So HDC could do that in their respective agenda for these changes, and I'll make sure I have them exactly as correct as what Angus is proposing. And likewise, the Historical Commission can do the same thing at their next coming up June meeting. So they could be voted on individually. I don't think that's a problem.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So let me. Sorry. So are Holly? Essentially, you saying we're each respective board is delaying until their own individual boards have a chance to review, and then they can vote on them. Is that what
Yes.
you just said?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that would be completely fine. Absolutely. All right.
Okay.
Angus, did I hear you? You thought that was okay?
Yes, and I emailed when I emailed Holly the proposed changes. I emailed everybody, so you should have a copy of those.
Yeah, I saw it come through. I just haven't read it yet. So, but I think that the proposal that's on the table right now is a good one. Is that something we vote?
I think that might be
question is directed to Holly. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I do think that might be a good idea for each board to vote, that you will review and hold them for your respective boards to review and vote on.
Okay, and I think that we could probably put this on the agenda for next Tuesday for us.
Yes, sir.
Great. Now, again, I'm seriously apologetic. I have Abby, right? I have Diane. I have Connie, and I have Carrie, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think what I'll do is I will ask one of the four members, and nobody else, right? No one else.
Correct.
Except for me.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one of my board members to move to review and approve the minutes this coming Tuesday. Can one of you board members do that for me, please? Thank you, Diane, for that motion. On that motion, Abby.
Aye.
Thank you. Connie.
Aye.
Very good. Great. Carrie.
Aye.
Great. And Diane on your motion.
Aye.
Thank you. And I'm in favor too. So that motion carries. Okay, Angus,
Everyone that's
it's
been
to
in
you,
this room is
sir.
like, what's going on?
Thank you, Ray. So for my commission, would someone like to make a motion to review these minutes at our next meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Tom. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks, Georgia. All in favor? Tom, on your motion?
Aye.
Abby?
Aye.
Oh,
Thank you. Georgia? Clement?
aye.
And I as well. Thank you, Holly.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs. I guess the next thing will be on the agenda is our presentations. I will go first, go into a brief introduction to the survey plan. And then I think we'll fall down to Preservation Trust. And then we have Mr. William Cook from CHP. Going to go into a little bit of Section 106. Thanks for being here, Will. And I think Rita's here for NPT. All right, so let me get this up here. All right. So, first of all, the fruit of the CLG's labor, obviously, is this new created historic property survey plan, a plan created by our consultants, POW, and reviewed and approved by the Nantucket Historical Commission, thank you, Historical Commission, and MHC, Massachusetts Historical Commission, respectively. This plan outlines the historic context, bibliography of historic materials, preliminary identification of areas, 59 total neighborhoods, an action plan for implementing the survey following the methodologies and guidelines by MHC standards to survey all contributing resources within our local and national districts. The 59 different surveys are unique with names, boundaries, and descriptions. As you all are probably aware, we had the first pilot, which was the Fish Lots neighborhood. Surveys are planning tools that ensure our local planning and preservation decisions are based on the most based on the most current and available information. Surveys should be updated regularly to consider the properties that have achieved significance. And since the original survey was conducted, this is what we are seeing now. We know that not all contributing structures that were surveyed in the 88, 89 effort, nor are they comprehensive as they are now, as the methodology has definitely changed to include both social and cultural components of structures. We also know that our period of significance has changed with our National Historic Landmark District expanded thanks to a CPC funded project by NPT to update our National Historic nomination back in 2012. And it was, of course, originally done in 1966, the same year National Historic Preservation Act was enacted. But this is to include Nantucket's national significance of tourism, historic preservation, and then obviously officially tie in our sister islands of Tuckernutt and Muskeget. This multi-phased comprehensive action plan not only will update our existing surveys, but it will also create new surveys, also some new formats, such as you see here. Most of them will be Form Bs, what Massachusetts calls them, for buildings. But we have some area forms, object forms, burial ground forms, structure forms, and park and landscape. And those will be picked as the action plan is done with those particular neighborhoods that may have those. The action plan also outlines threats to historic resources and neighborhoods. These include demolition, redevelopment, which we've all seen, climate change and sea level rise, and changes to our land and property uses. The survey plan is intended to take approximately 10 years. However, with our assistance of our nonprofit partners like NPT and Sconset Trust, as well as our continuing effort with applying for federal funding from MHC, this will help accelerate the goal. So very excited on that. One of the challenges, obviously, of creating the survey plan with PAL, which they brilliantly overcame, was to incorporate the NHL update windshield document, which was about 300 pages long of an Excel spreadsheet, but they were able to comprehensively edit it, that NHL data sheet, to assist in this plan, which was a great effort, and I know it was very, very time consuming. The survey plan also identifies the chronology of Nantucket's significant events, historic resources, and used much of that NHL update from 2012. If you've never read the NHL update, I highly recommend you do that. However, I will say that our survey plan right here actually has a more adapted and supplemented version, which actually provides some additional information from the 21st century. And I know you will enjoy it. Whenever anybody personally asks me about wanting to know more about Nantucket history, I always refer them to the NHL update from 2012. But now I'm going to refer them to our survey plan because it really is an in-depth worth of history. As you know, fiscal 21 was to read the survey plan and start the fish lots. In addition to the plan, we have now one Form A and 97 new Form Bs, which are available, which obviously replace the old HDC surveys for the benefit of our local and national district. Currently, for the fiscal 2022 year, PAL is finishing up the fish lots neighborhood, and they've started into the Brant Point. Brant Point is a densely built neighborhood, as we all know, from the 19th and 20th centuries, with approximately 300 existing surveys in the old format. So that is a high priority within our action plan to survey. The Historical Commission just received this week 19 draft survey forms for the Brant Point neighborhood. And I'm going to go in here, so right down in here. And we'll be reviewing those in the next coming weeks and actually into the next coming months to finish this project out. There soon will be starting the procurement process. Angus and I were just in the kickoff meeting with MHC and a whole bunch of other communities within the Commonwealth that received CLG funding to start our fiscal 23 survey grant project, which will include more of the Brant Point neighborhood. This effort by PAL, MHC, NHC, for the benefit of the HDC and our historic district couldn't be possible without this collaboration and this CLG status. So thank you all for your part in this. Also special thanks to NPT for providing much needed historic data to our consultants, PAL, and have been available literally at the beck and call. So appreciate that, as well as Sconset Trust for continuing this much important effort. I don't think the HDC is aware, but Sconset Trust has provided a dozen or so surveys for the NHC and the MHC to review, and those will update certain HDC surveys that we have out in Sconset. So of course, we're very excited and appreciative of that effort as well. I wanted to take this time to just go to, we can get in here. You all can still see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this comes in correctly, is a pretty cool tool that PAL created for the use of our survey work. And you can see all the different, if I zoom out. So these are all 59 of the areas that the NHC working group and PAL created in the survey plan. We tried to identify these areas as much as possible, geographically, excuse me, as well as knowing a little bit of the history of how those were created, whether they were created organically or actually platted out. But our main focus, as I move around, sorry here, is within the core district of downtown. Here's your fish lots that they've done. And then this is where they've been working on down to the Brant Point area. Yep. Oh, okay. I'm gonna stop sharing. But all of that is available, thank you, is available on the town's website. And I encourage everyone to take a look at it. We've had a preservation planning page created. There is a link to both the commission's pages to it, as well as the CLG page, a description of, and as well as all the surveys that were done. Right now, it's all in one ginormous PDF, but eventually it'll be available on the GIS page, just like the older ones are now. When you click the MHC inventory forms, you click that and you're going to see more diamonds up on the screen. So I guess with that, I'm going to just wonder if there's any questions at all. No questions?
No questions at this point, but Holly,
All
thank
right.
you so much for the
None.
all
Thank
the
you.
effort in the work that you've put in. It takes a village. But
It sure
but-
does. And that's my biggest point on this is this CLG effort. Yes, the Historical Commission does a lot of the boots on the ground with the consultants, myself included. But this is to benefit the overall historic district, the HDC. You guys get to see the fruit of the labor when these applications get before the commission. And I try to provide you all, even with the draft forms, when we know we have them for any particular application. You know, this is just a benefit of everybody. And again, we couldn't do this without being a CLG and having that public and private partnership. So I guess now I have the privilege of, I think, passing this over to maybe Rita. I think she's here on behalf of the NPT. Thank you, Rita.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. So hi everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Rita Carr. I'm the Deputy Director for Nantucket Preservation Trust, and I'm here today to talk about some of the work that we've been doing recently around deconstruction and architectural salvage. So we know that for most of Nantucket's history, architectural salvage was the way of life here. Buildings were moved, reused, shipwrecked, scavenged, and it was really only in the 20th century that construction waste disposal became an economic option. And the kind of waste that we're seeing today would be unfathomable to Nantucketers of the past. So last year, working with Remain Nantucket, we commissioned a 2-phase feasibility study done by EVP consultants who are out of Boston. And it was a study to try and find exactly how much waste we are generating and what can be done about it. So the study found that every year on Nantucket, we are sending more than 17,000 tons of C&D waste off island. Most of that going to landfills in Ohio and Maine. And a lot of that waste is the result of demolition of houses. But a significant portion of those materials have the potential to be salvaged and reused through deconstruction. So deconstruction is the process of taking apart a house so that pieces can be reused, as opposed to just mechanical demolition and going in with a bulldozer, sledgehammers. So the study indicated that of those 17,000 tons of C&D waste, approximately 4,500 tons, and most likely more than that, could be salvaged each year. Those salvaged building materials have a market value of about $100 per ton. So if we're reusing 25% of that C&D waste, that would amount to over $457,000 worth of material. So deconstruction does incur higher out-of-pocket costs to consumers, but it's a very insignificant increase compared to the median and average home prices here on Nantucket. So it's really wouldn't cost very much more to do something that's, in the benefit of a more sustainable future for the island. And there's a lot of positives about deconstruction, even going beyond the environmental benefits and diverting all this waste from the landfill. It would create new specialized jobs within the construction field. And we know that there's a need and a market for these salvage materials on island, as I'm sure many of you who work in historic homes know, and even just anecdotally for MPT, people will call us up looking for, you know, salvaged items that we do know there's a possibility to have here. So, you know, we're always looking at deconstruction as sort of a last resort, like we want to save whatever structures we can, and the HCC can obviously deny any demolition applications that it receives, but we also know that there are circumstances where a building can't be moved, it can't be saved, and particularly with coastal resilience in mind, as we're seeing greater flood risk and erosion in these coastal areas, there will be buildings that that need to come down, and deconstruction can be part of that coastal resilience planning. So this year, as we look to sort of explore these ideas more in depth, we are bringing some speakers to the island who have worked around the ideas of deconstruction and architectural salvage in other communities. So again, we're partnering with Remain to bring these speakers. The first will be an event on June 26th at 5:30 p.m. at the Athenaeum. Our speaker will be Stephanie Phillips, who's the Deconstruction and Circular Economy Manager for the city of San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio implemented a deconstruction ordinance last year, which requires that any building built prior to 1920 that's going to be taken down has to be demolished, and those materials salvaged for reuse rather than, it has to be deconstructed, not demolished. So Stephanie will come and speak about the sort of consensus building around getting that ordinance implemented and the lessons that they've learned so far along the way. And that's the only deconstruction ordinance in the country that is part of a historic preservation office. And then in September, on September 27th, we'll host 3 speakers. The first being May Bowley, who is the executive director of Repurpose Savannah, which is a nonprofit organization that deconstructs homes and then sells the salvage materials in Savannah, Georgia, and the surrounding area. And there's no actual ordinance there, so it's not required, but people are choosing to hire Repurpose Savannah just in the interest of being more sustainable. Another speaker will be Felix Heisel, who is the director of the Circular Construction Lab at Cornell University, as well as an architect and a professor in their School of Architecture. And then also John Livermore, who's the principal for sustainable energy principal for sustainable energy at EVP Consultants. And he led up the feasibility study that we did last year. So he'll be able to speak more in depth about that. So we are working with Lauren Sinatra and her role at the Builders Association to hopefully get that program in September certified as a continuing ed program. And all of the talks will be free and open to the public, thanks to the support of Remain. So we hope to see you all there, and all of the presenters who will be coming to Nantucket will be here for a few days around their presentation. So if you can't make a specific time, or if you would just be interested in having a more casual conversation or a cup of coffee or something, please do reach out. So we want to make sure this information is as widely available as possible, and we're excited to see, you know, what we on Nantucket can learn from other communities that have these successful salvage and deconstruction programs. So I'd love to, if you have any questions, please. Okay. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you, Rita. Appreciate that. Anybody have any questions? If not, I will, with those dates that Rita just spit off, I will first mention that MPT's Rambling just came out today. So If you are on their mailing list, you can get a copy of it there, or actually from, I think from their website.
Yeah, it's
But
on, we don't have the physical magazines on Island yet, but the digital version is up, so.
digital's there, and all these dates that you just said are included in there.
Yes,
But I can provide that to the commissioners if you all are interested in that. I would highly recommend it. I think it's definitely, we all have indicated that salvage and demo is something that we are all interested in seeing more discussion on. So
Holly.
thank you. Yes.
Holly. And Rita, I think that's what an interesting program, and what an interesting, I'm looking forward to hearing the lady who's coming on the 26th of June, because the idea that San Antonio, Texas would be a leader in setting and in enacting an ordinance that required this kind of cautious demolition or thoughtful demolition is a very interesting idea. And the fact that she's going to talk about how you develop a consensus around getting to that ordinance, I think will be extremely interesting. So I'm very happy that you and Remain put this program together, and I'm looking forward to hearing that presentation. So thank you for that.
great, thanks. Oh, and I should mention, Stephanie actually spoke at a, in 2020, we did a virtual talk with her that's recorded, and it's on MPT's YouTube channel. If you search like Stephanie Phillips Nantucket, it should come up, and that was prior to the ordinance actually passing, but she spoke about the work that was ongoing then in 2020. So we're excited that, you know, now we can actually bring her to the island. So
Awesome. It's pretty cool.
Holly,
Yes, sir.
you can hear me?
Yep.
Great. Rita, thank you for the presentation. A lot to think about. I have a lot of comments, but I'm gonna save them just because, in the interest of time, because I know we have a long agenda. But thank you for the presentation.
thanks for giving me the time.
Thank you, Rita, as always. Next up, oh, Angus,
Oh,
sorry.
I just wanted to thank Rita for the presentation, and Holly, I really would appreciate you sending out the dates. That would be
Absolutely.
helpful.
Yep,
Thank you.
we'll do that. Next, I have the privilege of introducing Will Cook from CHP. Those of you that might not know, he is part of our expert council when it comes to our review of the wind farms off the coast of the island and other parts of, I guess, the eastern seaboard for that matter. So thank you for being here, Will, and I'll take it off to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. It's nice to join you, and exciting to hear about all the great preservation work you have ongoing on your wonderful island. So I was asked, my name is Will Cook. I've had a chance to meet or connect with some of you during our engagement by the town on a number of wind farm projects, but I was asked to join you today in your role as part of the CLG program to maybe give a little refresher on Section 106 and Section 110F of the National Historic Preservation Act, to sort of orient all of us around these two important federal preservation laws, and also to share with you some real world examples of maybe case studies or legal advocacy projects where local governments have played an official role as a consulting party in the Section 106 process. So got a lot of images in a short amount of time, but I'll get through it and we'll keep you on track. So we'll be looking at using Section 106 as a legal tool, talking a little bit about the standards of review and how Section 106 differs from Section 110 F. And also, as I mentioned, sharing some advocacy outcomes with you so you can see how these laws are used in practice. So we all know a million reasons why preservation matters. Built into the language of the National Historic Preservation Act, there's a statement of purpose, which I like to call my elevator speech, about how historic preservation helps protect our sense of orientation as an American people. Civic identity feeds into this, beauty, history, architecture, and all the other reasons why we preserve: sacredness, creativity, sustainability, and economics. These have always been outcomes of historic preservation. They tend to be spoken a lot more of today, but there are myriad reasons why we preserve, and each one of them is an important one. So to jump right into 106, there's often an expectation that our federal preservation laws are what I'd call project killers. And that's not how Congress set them up to be, versus your local preservation ordinance, where your commissions are able to say yes or no to proposed changes that might be made in response to different kinds of development projects or changes to historic properties by their owners. Our federal preservation laws, by contrast, were designed by Congress to balance economic development with preservation. And I'll explain a little bit more about that shortly. So unlike a typical local historic preservation commission where you issue a certificate of appropriateness that allows a change to go forward or not, Section 106 is a multi-step process in consultation with consulting parties, including local governments like yourselves or members of local government commissions like yourselves, to cooperate or consult with federal agencies on identifying historic properties that might be affected by a federal project. And that means either permitted or that will use federal funding. In Nantucket's case, it's easy because your entire island and Tuckernut and Muskegon Islands are all a National Historic Landmark. And I'll talk about why that's important in a minute. But if there's ever any, adverse effect on your island or your islands, the town's islands, everything that's on your island and is considered to be a contributing property will be identified by the federal agency in charge of permitting the project. And then, as I mentioned, to the extent that there are historic properties that will be affected, there's steps in consultation that look at whether the effects will be adverse or harmful. And that goes to the heart of, whether the change will affect your historic integrity or your historic property's integrity. And then if there are adverse effects, how to find ways to minimize or avoid, minimize, or mitigate those adverse effects in consultation. And there's always a bit of a tightrope because if the consulting parties cannot agree with the federal agency on the outcome or the proper outcome, the federal agency is allowed under the National Historic Preservation Act to terminate consultation. So there's always this tension that a little bit of a tightrope that you walk as a consulting party when you're involved in Section 106 consultation. So I won't dive into the law, but I wanted you just to see this is a very short law. The Section 106 statute is very short and broad, and as it states, just like I said, it requires federal agencies to consider the effects of their undertakings, and to the extent that there are adverse effects, to find ways to avoid, minimize, or mitigate those harms. The statute, Section 106, is fleshed out in the regulations that were promulgated by the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, which is our federal government's lead agency for Section 106 enforcement. Now, somewhat related to Section 106 is a special provision of the National Historic Preservation Act known as Section 110F. This is the special law that applies to National Register listed properties that also qualify as National Historic Landmarks. And what this law requires of federal agencies involved in permitting is to apply a heightened standard of review. So if there's any adverse effect on a National Historic Landmark like your town, then the federal agency has a duty to consult with the National Park Service to use all possible planning to minimize harm. So in that way, the standard is slightly higher. There's a requirement that all possible planning be used. Now, it's possible to argue about what all possible planning means, but that's what the standard is. And this has not been fully fleshed out in case law. So to show you how this works in practice, I wanted to give you some examples of various National Historic Landmarks and other National Register listed properties, just to kind of show how these laws get used by local governments and their advocacy. So the first one is a Section 110F. I'll call it a Section 110F project because that's how we're looking at it. But this involved the construction of large transmission towers across the James River by Dominion Power, an energy company that's based in Virginia. And Section 110F was triggered because there is a property known as Carter's Grove Plantation on the banks of the James River that has been designated as a National Historic Landmark. Within its view shed, and this is a snapshot of Carter's Grove and the James River looking towards Jamestown, this project was proposed by Dominion Power. And the U.S. Army Corps, because this project involved construction in navigable waters of the U.S., the Army Corps is in charge of permitting this project. And during the course of the permitting, the Army Corps messed up and didn't comply with Section 110F because it didn't. It took the position that visual effects were not direct effects or not adverse effects, which was legally wrong. There was litigation by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, tribes, and other advocacy groups, just showing you lighting impacts in addition to the kind of visual landscape interruption. This case went to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit. This was an important win in one respect because it made the federal court ruled for the very first time that visual effects are adverse effects. However, this wasn't a preservation victory apart from the legal win because Dominion went forward with building the power lines. So this is what the James River looks like today because the Army Corps allowed it to go forward. The plaintiffs were not able to get an injunction by a federal court to stop the construction of the project because the Dominion Power took the position that if it were not allowed to build, that there would be rolling blackouts in the Chesapeake region and military bases would not have the power to take care of the nation's security. So a sad outcome at the end of the day, but the silver lining was that now we don't have to argue with federal agencies about visual impacts being direct effects. Another example, I'll take you to another NHL. This is Charleston, which I consider a cousin of Nantucket's in terms of a large NHL, lots of contributing properties. This involves cruise ships. And the project that triggered Section 106 review, again, by the Army Corps, was a proposed new cruise terminal that would have let even bigger ships into port. And the other issue is that there was no limitation on the number of ships and how long they could come and so or stay in port. The issue here and the concern for preservation advocates in the city of Charleston had to do with effects to the view shed, to the National Historic Landmark District, just kind of showing you the scale. It's a 14-story ship. When it's in port, there are adverse effects. Charleston, like Nantucket, has historic ties to the maritime landscape, views of the harbor and the ocean. And these ships, once they were part of the cruise terminal, were interrupting those view sheds. All sorts of other indirect and cumulative effects like traffic from the cruise ships. This meant that owners of historic properties couldn't get in or out of their properties. So there were interesting sort of cumulative effects from this project. Just an advocacy piece from the Preservation Society of Charleston. This, again, it's an interesting preservation story because this is an incredibly intense impact on a fragile, small scale built environment, much like Nantucket's. Again, litigation ensued. Unlike the James River example, the preservation advocates were successful here and convinced a federal court to revoke the Army Corps' permit, which it had granted to the State Ports Authority to build the new cruise terminal. And it did so after finding that there was no effect on historic properties. And so that's why the preservation advocates went to court. I was at the National Trust for Historic Preservation at the time and helped write the amicus brief for this case in federal court. Another impact on this kind of shows you again the scale But there was a good holding here that we got from the court, and it was a good reminder to the Corps that courts, have no obligation to stand aside and rubber stamp what federal agencies decide to do. That there's a mandate that they comply with our federal preservation laws, and as a result, the permit was revoked, and 10 years later, the terminal was not built and isn't going to be built. So this considered a preservation victory. But these battles take a long time. As you know, now we're leading into offshore wind, which is one of the hot topics right now with historic preservation, and Nantucket, of course, is at the epicenter of this. Another visual impact example. You have a lot of experience with this. You fought off successfully the Cape Wind project. Interesting thing about Cape Wind was that it was going to be sited in the middle of Nantucket Sound, which itself is a 385,000 acre National Register listed landscape. And I was also involved with this project when I was at the National Trust, wrote a series of amicus briefs. What a lot of people have forgotten is that we did not win the legal battle in this case, but the legal battle stretched out so long that the developer ended up losing the tax credits, tax subsidies for the projects that have enabled the financing to go forward. And so the project wasn't built. We fought really hard, but didn't get the result we hoped for in our federal courts. So not all of these are, victories, even though we would argue that we were right. Fast forward a bit to the Block Island Wind Farm. It's a 5 turbine test project off the coast of Block Island that is in operation today. And of course, you well know about Vineyard Wind, which, if constructed, will be the first industrial scale wind farm, offshore wind farm in the nation. And Nantucket has had an important role in the environmental permitting and resolution of adverse effects for that project. Now, again, showing you some, the landscape, the views of the sea, contributing properties to the National Historic Landmark like Mariah Mitchell Foundation, all affected by adverse effects, lighting impacts. We could go on and on. But I wanted to show you, again, just to kind of show you how you're not alone, that this is a current list of offshore wind projects, and I'll share this with you. I'll share the PowerPoint with you, Holly, if you'd like to distribute it. But this is happening on every single coastline in the United States right now. Projects are being permitted in about 2 years or less. And so there's a lot of development pressure by the White House. In addition, there's a huge push to get other kinds of renewable energy up and running, like solar. And so here's an example of solar and wind on land. But when you start developing at an industrial scale, you obviously start to encounter different kinds of adverse effects to landscapes in particular. Here's another visual of what can happen to farmland as a result of large-scale solar installations. And some of these projects trigger Section 106 and Section 110F to the extent that National Historic Landmarks are implicated. I worked on a project for the American Battlefield Trust to provide some guidance to developers on how to help de-risk their permitting and to minimize adverse effects to historic properties. And the last example I'll leave you, since Nantucket, like many island communities, is at the forefront of climate change and sea level rise. Back to Charleston again. Interesting project. I represented the Preservation Society of Charleston. The city of Charleston was also participating in this, what I'm about to share with you, as a consulting party, waterfront community like your own. The project and what triggered the 106 review is a seawall, a proposed seawall. So the Army Corps undertook the study. It was completed as an environmental impact statement. But what I wanted to share with you is that initially the Army Corps was not going to complete an environmental impact statement. We pushed back really hard, arguing that, well, you need an environmental impact statement because there were so many adverse effects. But also this had interesting implications for Section 106 and Section 110F, namely because of the visual impacts that storm surge walls, flood walls, or seawalls were going to create if constructed. So we don't know if these will be constructed. This is just a planning process. But, you know, I think, again, like you might think, oh, seawall, way to stop flooding. In fact, this was going to exacerbate flooding to the historic district because it wasn't letting water out from the major rain events. And it wasn't tall enough to stop even the most recent hurricane from surging over the seawall. So, but because of the 106 advocacy, we were able to get a better outcome than we would have had the city not participated as a consulting party. So there were roles for submitting comments. Holly will share this with you. But I hope this this example of different kinds of ways that local governments have intervened will help you keep your eyes open for ways that you can continue to participate in federal projects that might have adverse effects on your National Historic Landmark District. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, William.
Thank you so much. It's awesome.
Oh.
And for those of you that may not know, I lived right outside of Charleston for 10 years as a planner. So I remember some of that stuff going on quite a bit. Thank you very, very much. I think, does anybody have any questions for Will while he's here?
Yes. Can I ask a question, Holly?
Of course you can, Diane.
If the 106 is true or somewhat true, and 110 also has got to do with what happens to the island or the area with what they want to do, how can they go ahead and do something when they still have that it works completely against what 106 and the protection of the islands have to do? I don't understand how Boehm, if you can use a name, comes in and does whatever the hell they want. And you argue. I'm part of a group that argues against this, and I'm the representative for the HDC against this. And I have tried many times to get to text to some of the people that supposedly are at the meetings, and there's no answer. Why do we have these 106 and stuff if they're not going to listen at all? Or how do we make them listen?
Yeah.
So they have to give an answer.
So it's a good question. This goes to, and I will be the first to agree with you that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, is not doing a good job with Section 106 compliance. But at the heart of the problem is that Section 106 was designed, again, not to provide veto power. So as consulting parties, we're all forced into this position to try to find ways to avoid, minimize, or mitigate harm as best as possible. But there's never any guarantee about what the outcome will be. The solution, which isn't necessarily an outcome-based solution, is that to the extent that BOEM or any other federal agency skips steps in the Section 106 process or fails to apply the higher standard required by Section 110F, that creates legal leverage for communities like yours to use in litigation. And that's why I shared with you some of these examples of Section 106 or Section 110F projects that didn't rise to the level of full compliance with the law. And so preservation advocates were able to use those legal errors to go to court. Now, federal courts can't dictate what the outcome should be of projects, but they can send the permitting back to the drawing board. So we're in a bit of a delicate dance with federal agencies in terms of how to negotiate the end of the Section 106 process. But the heart of the problem is that when Congress created this law in 1966, it created it to balance preservation with economic development. So you're right to be frustrated. I'm frustrated as a lawyer who deals with this all of the time, but they're structural issues that simply that you have at federal law that you don't have as when you're applying your local preservation ordinance that lets you say yes or no. We don't have that same ability at the federal level.
Well, I don't know. I think of the news that we have heard recently, I mean, brought it up on the loss of our financial gain from these turbines. That's got to be impacting the island as financially as well as everything else. If we were going to try again or continue, can we continue, or is it a done deal and no?
Well, each of these projects is permitted separately. The issue with what I think you're getting to financial consequences or economic impacts. Those aren't considered as part of the 106 process. They're considered as part of a separate law or separate layer of legal review called the National Environmental Policy Act that requires those impacts to be considered and put into an environmental impact statement. But NEPA doesn't dictate, again, what a project looks like. It's designed to share with the public what the good and bad and ugly about a project will be. So the problem is we're all worried about these issues, including financial consequences to historic communities, heritage tourism in particular, but federal law only requires that these impacts be considered. It doesn't say that after considering them, NEPA allows the federal agency to disallow the project. That's unfortunately not how the NEPA was set up, but the financial impacts. Sorry?
I said it's time to change it. The laws are one step up a flight of stairs, and it's ridiculous because we're going to, Nantucket, particularly in this, I don't know, but the other ones are going to take the brunt of this whole loss of finances, and then they come up with they're only going to kill 40 whales in their process, and 40 whales. They had 40 whales on the shores of New Jersey.
I'd love to join you on the steps of Congress one day to make that argument. Mr. Montgomery?
Yeah, I know you were there, Will, and some of the other people here. I'm the 106 representative for the NHC.
Yes,
We
sir.
had a bunch of questions for the Mayflower Wind people, and they have an answer for everything, whether it's a logical one or not. They just keep talking right straight through the argument. And we brought up the subject of being able to see the windmills on the horizon. And they said, well, they're, going to be 22 miles offshore. And I brought up the fact that you can see towers and buildings on the Cape from Great Point. And those are at least 25 miles away. And those are only 300 and 400 feet tall. Yet the turbines that these folks are talking about are 1,099 feet tall. And that's almost as tall as the Empire State Building. And how they think that we're not going to see that and how that's not going to affect our tourism is beyond me. And so they don't care, or they don't even listen. Very frustrating.
It is frustrating, but as I mentioned, developers who don't listen and federal agencies don't listen are creating legal errors that you can leverage to your advantage in court. So unfortunately, the litigation can never come. The litigation process can't begin until the permitting is over. So as consulting parties are there to fight, to correct the record, to create a record, really to be able to use in an appeal of a federal agency's decision. That's why consulting parties work hard to do what they do. It's not only to try to influence a better outcome, which you always hope for, but if that can't be achieved with the agency, then you've always got the leverage of a federal court correcting those errors and starting the permitting all over again. And that can have significant financial consequences to a developer, especially the extent that developers often are operating under difficult financing timelines. This was the reason why the Cape Wind project ultimately failed.
Is there a group of
Thank you.
is there a group of people that would incorporate all the areas that are affected by this to get together instead of each town having to go to court? And who does that? If there is such a group, is there a master group?
There's not a master group, but that wouldn't stop coalitions from forming. Only consulting parties are able to participate in litigation. That's why it's important to have a seat at the table as a consulting party, even if you don't get the results you want. Other parties wouldn't have standing to move forward with a legal case.
Well, we won't give up the fight somehow.
Absolutely not. Thank you, Holly. I don't want to
Thank
run
you,
over too
Will.
much.
Thank you very much. We are very appreciative. I
William,
will
thank
say
you very much.
we're very fortunate to have Will and CHP in our court, along with other communities on the Eastern Seaboard. So thank you, Will.
Thank you. From the HCC, thank you.
Mr. Chair I guess I'll say Mr. Chair Poll and Mr. Chair McLeod. The next thing we had on the agenda was just basically a request for a future presentation, possibly by our MHC CLG coordinator, Jennifer Doherty. She's basically all CLGs, including obviously myself as coordinator, to our right-hand person as far as direction goes, as far as education goes. I think Angus had reached out to her on whether or not that she could do a presentation on practices and policies around demolition. I will say this, that we all know that Nantucket is unique and we don't follow the typical demolition of other communities within the Commonwealth following Chapter 40C. We have our own special act. So that would just be up for discussion.
Thank you, Holly. I'm happy to speak on that. That is, it seemed like it would be useful information, and unfortunately, we sort of ran out of time to check all the boxes to allow that to happen at this meeting. But I would love to get, sort of take the temperature of the HDC on a future lecture or presentation from Jennifer Doherty. And this could fall into the category of topics of mutual discussion. We believe that it is.
Angus, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, fantastic. Because sometimes I'm speaking and it's clear that no one here is hearing what I'm saying. Thank you. And so can I take that as an invitation to hear from our board members regarding that, Angus? All right, so Angus, you give a thumbs up. So Abby, Diane, Connie, and Carrie, I'm pretty sure I know where the conversation is going to go, and it can be brief, but I'd like to hear from all of you on that.
I'd like to say just a little thing, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
In that when we get an application that says Holly gives the spiel, it's a historic structure, that we need the time to really go in depth into a structure's history to really verify its date. And right now, I don't think we give it enough time because it takes so much time to really do the in-depth research on a historic structure. So that is my woe.
Right.
Okay.
Ray,
Yes, Diane?
can I go next?
Of course.
I think what Abby says is important, is true. We get houses like we've got one on at least on the agenda continually. It's a historic building, and between what being done to it, the building is not going to be as it was back some multi years. I think we have to give not only time to study, which is very important. I think that new study by Abby and the school is remarkable, but to understand what it's going to do to an area beyond just moving a building. When you move a building, you're destroying a streetscape that has existed for a long time. I think we have to consider what the building is rather than the demolition first. So I would like to see more study put in after we get that application, and maybe Abby could, Holly could include in the description of the building what its rating is, whether it's A, B, C, so that we know from when we're going down the agenda to look what's there. We have to have more.
Diana, you're referring to another Abby, right? There's never two Abbeys, never, ever. And now there are two Abbeys.
Yeah.
I think.
I'm saying your name because I'm looking at you.
Oh, but you're referring to Abby.
Right, I mean Holly who has all the information and has been instrumental in this study. I rely on what she has to say, and I think we need to know when we see the agenda what rating it is.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just wanted to mention, thank
Holly.
you for that. Just that this is why surveying our cultural resources is so important. And this is why being a CLG is a top priority for us to be able to continue doing that. So, unfortunate, I think personally, I think the town was a little remiss, obviously, in continuing the survey effort from the 80s. Can't do anything about that, but actually now that we have a plan and facilitating that plan and working obviously with our nonprofits and MHC and whoever our consultants are and moving forward doing that, again, we're not going to survey anything that's non-contributing, which for some reason was happening during the 80s. They were surveying non-contributing structures. So that's the most important, because these surveys that we are receiving with this effort is what's going to help you all as HDC commissioners to evaluate that structure on its contributing, not just its contributing status, but also its architectural, its social, its cultural, and really dive into even as much as what was done recently. So I'll give you an example, something that the HDC looks at a lot are roofs. Roofs are a character defining feature. You all are seeing stuff going from asphalt to cedar or from cedar to asphalt. And one of the things that we recently ran into with a discussion with MHC was why our consultants put that on our surveys. And, oh, well, that's not what is normally seen. And I said, au contraire, that's something that, that Nantucket has always wanted to know about and is always discussed about. So there are things that we have requested that are a little unique to Nantucket to document. And that is one thing. So surveying is very important. And I think that will help really with the applications before the HDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you very much. So a few things. Connie, Carrie, if you have anything to add, I'd like to hear from both of you. And I understand that Val has joined us. Is that correct? And if so, I get thumbs up. So Val, if you have anything to say on that, I'd like to hear from you as well. And I'm going to ask that everyone be succinct just in the interest of time. So I have to be at the door at 3:00. I'm sorry to say. Anyone? Connie, Carrie, Val?
Ray, it's Carrie. I'm
Hi.
just piping in to say I'm interested in hearing more. And that's about it.
Yeah, I believe, my thoughts are, I have so many questions, thoughts, comments on this that it would take me at least an hour to say. So thank you, Carrie. I think we should continue the discussion. Val, Connie, anything?
Well, I just got on, so I'm not really sure what the
Yeah.
topic is, but
Oh, no, it was basically about our demo policy and,
Oh, okay.
well, okay, so that's a gross oversimplification because then it tied into the survey work that's being done, et cetera. Hopefully you can still hear me.
I
Can you?
can. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm having major technical difficulties here.
More information
Anyway.
is good.
Yeah, a lot more information, further discussion, definitely. Thank you, Val. Thanks for joining us. Connie, anything?
No, I voiced the same concerns and, as the newest member, it's sometimes discouraging to see what happens and what's going on. So any more information, any more we can learn, I'm all for it.
Great.
I've got one
Thank you,
question,
Connie.
Mr. Chair, for
And
Holly.
Abby, right?
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
through you. I was wondering if it's when something's slotted for a demo, and it actually takes place. Or maybe, I don't know when this happens, but I was wondering, is there an emergency fund? Like a grant might be in place to salvage a building before it's actually gets the either deconstruction or the complete demo? Is there something in place? Like
I don't want to stay on this too long, but do you mean salvage the building intact or in pieces?
Well, so I'm referring to a project we had a while back. I'll just say it was on Orange Street. And it was in pretty bad disrepair. And I was wondering if there, is there ever, would there be money, like federal money or state money to help to save that before it absolutely falls in? Like, what if, when you get to that emergency stage, what can we do? Because there are a lot of buildings on the island. I'll be driving around and I'll see one that's just about to cave in, and it's obviously a historic structure. What do we do about that?
Mr. Chair,
So,
may I?
Abby? Well, yeah, feel free. I have my own answer, but go ahead, Holly. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, obviously, as the HDC, we as staff would want to facilitate that dialogue with the owner. So let us know if you see those things. You guys sometimes are our eyes and ears. Two, this kind of harks on to what the Historical Commission has been discussing about having some sort of local fund for historic property owners that may not have a lot of money, that may be able to tap into to help, restore their windows, redo their roof, redo their gutters, those type of things. So we're not seeing that derelict, if you will, to help facilitate that. There are levels of funding. There are some funding that now that we are a CLG that we can apply for to help create those type of things. And that is one thing that the Historical Commission has been talking about, whether or not that's something that we can do in the near future, or if this is something that we're gonna have to plan for. But yes, there's definitely some things that we're looking at to hit what you brought up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Holly. Anything else? Okay. Holly, you want to lead us to the next spot? Sorry, Angus, do you have anything that you want to say on your end about that?
So this is really just about more information for us all, and it is just, what are the the typical practices and procedures around demolition, partial demolition. So it sounds like she would certainly, Jennifer would certainly provide us with more information.
And with that, to both chairs, I can facilitate that conversation with Jennifer. If this board, this entire commission is so inclined for that, and maybe we can have a separate work group with her. See, and probably Zoom would probably be the best course because that's what she does around the state. And we can plan for that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess we can segue right into what we're doing right now, a healthy collaboration between commissioners. Basically the first one would be last time we met, there was a discussion and basically about it having a separate MOU. For those of you not know, we have a required MOU with the state because we are made up of 2 commissions. A lot of the jurisdictions have 1 commission that handle everything, but not everybody is as busy as Nantucket. So we are fortunate with 2 commissions, and we have an MOU to handle the roles and responsibilities of the CLG, which you saw in the agenda. And I think most people have seen what the requirements are, both from the commission as well as staff. But we were speaking as a group about whether or not having a separate MOU internally with the town body, if you will, between both the commissions and staff. So just want to know whether or not, 1, is this still necessary? 2, is it still desired? And 3, should this just be on hold if there is still interest in having it? So that I'll leave you at that.
Thank you, Holly. So we put together an MOU. We were working with some of the HDC and the Historical Commission to come up with this MOU, which just clarified what our roles were, what our shared concerns were, and sort of setting the ground for us teaming up and working for common goals. So it was created. And it needs the next step would be for the HTC to accept it. Or
I'm
modify.
sorry, has this been drafted and circulated?
Mr. Chair, there was a draft, and I believe it was circulated, but it's been a good over a year and a half. Yeah, it's been a while. So
all right, here now that our agenda is getting shorter, we can have a little bit more time to do the other things that we should be concerning ourselves with. So could we put that on our agenda for Tuesday's meeting?
Sure, I'll make that motion if you want.
yes.
I'm not even sure we need to move it. I think that
Yep.
Look, I can't imagine anybody's going to object to it. So why don't we put it on? We'll have the draft there, and we will discuss it and see what we can do. All right, and let's see, beginning of the meeting
Okay,
while we're all
Thanks.
fresh.
sounds good.
Okay. All
Sounds
right.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I guess this is to Chair Angus. You have had the historic determination versus National Register eligible. Is this pretty much to dive into the differences of the 2?
Oh, it's just having help. I think it's just helpful to have an understanding of that, because there are a lot of terms that get thrown around. National Register, local, landmark, local district, OHD, there there's a lot. So it's just, I think it's helpful to clarify that. So I think it might be a helpful thing to discuss.
All right, so in your packet, we did see, this is a brochure that MHC has available to folks, which talks about the difference between being the local district and the national district. We are very unique, of course, I keep on saying that, because we don't have any donut holes in either, and we don't have any donut holes between the two. There are some jurisdictions that have that. The fact of the matter is, if you're in the local district, you're in the national district. So that is very helpful. Properties that are obviously located within the local district and the national district are automatically in the state register. If you're uncertain about the state register, I do have a copy of it. The state provides an updated list every so often, and I do have that copy here in the office. And it's not, unfortunately, something that is on the website. However, I could probably make our section available for it. On the national side, that's where our NHL update is very, very important. We wouldn't be an NHL if we weren't an NHL district, and we wouldn't have the everything on the national register. So the way that handled is everything that's listed in the NHL update, contributing versus non-contributing, is part of the overall district. It is a part of its body, if you will. Our local district, obviously, as you see right here, is one of the two from that were done prior to the federal law in 1966 that had the two special acts. And we are unique where we don't follow Chapter 40C. So we do have things on Nantucket that are actually more prone for a national significance versus a local significance. You all are probably familiar, most of you should be familiar with two structures built out in Pocomo by a famous architect, Robert Venturi. Those two structures are obviously in the Nantucket local district. They're in the Nantucket National District, but they don't really have any type of contributing aspect towards the Nantucket local district, because our local district really and truly is focused on our local significance. But they were built in a period of time, I think at the cusp, quite frankly, of our significance. But they have more of a national significance because Robert Venturi is a famous national architect. And so those would be something that we as a CLG, if we wanted to say, you know what, we think those need to have a significance at the national level. We could, if we wanted to, petition that and go through that process. So those are some things, to think about. For the most part, because we are already a national registered district, the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, Massachusetts Historical, doesn't necessarily like registered districts to individually nominate something on the National Register. But I think in this case, we would have some room to argue. I hope this is the direction you're thinking, Angus, for a conversation.
I think it's all helpful information.
I just want to get Mrs. Faith.
So there is a difference between the two.
Was
So,
Abby trying to say something just now? Sorry.
in the case of the Venturi houses, how would that benefit the island, the protection of the houses, for those to be designated as
Well, I
national?
think if I may, it's something to remember that just because something is designated, it's not going to give protection, because the highest protection for any historic structure is a preservation restriction. But it would show that we are acknowledging their significance at the national level within our local and national district. It doesn't have, they don't have specific, you know, they're not something that built by a coffin. They're not associated with our whaling era, not even necessarily with the preservation era, but I would say more on the national level. And I think others would probably agree with that.
Thanks, Holly.
I would say, in the interest of time, if there are any comments, questions, concerns, other topics that you all think would be good for the two to get together. Again, this is our required meeting for this fiscal year that ends at the end of the month. But we are, you know, with time allows, we're always allowed to meet more than once. So I will definitely be contacting the state on seeing how we can get a work group or workshop with Jen Doherty and MHC. But if there's any other topics, now is the time.
So, first of all, Holly, actually, before my first of all, you can hear me, right?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay, good. All right. So first of all, I want to say thank you for putting all this together. That's most important. Thank you so much. Second of all, there's been these discussions at various points during this meeting for, workshops, task groups, things like that. For all of us to convene together like this, particularly when you've got a guy like me who's completely an IT imbecile, I think that the idea of workshops and task groups is really great, because most of what we have discussed sort of as an overview today, we could literally spend hours and hours and hours discussing. And I think that needs to be done more at a micro level, in the same way the HCC does little task groups to investigate this and that thing. I think that these things that we've discussed overall now need to be looked at in task group form. That would be task groups comprised of both boards is what I would like to say. So, but thank you, Holly. Thanks a lot.
That's good.
They could certainly work that way. So Ray, are you thinking sort of the OFC group meeting with a focus group from the NHC?
I'm suggesting joint groups now, Angus. There are so many discrete topics that were raised today. I think for one group to handle all that would be tough. It's almost like we want to create separate groups with people that are interested in various, like I am very interested in the demo salvage controversy. I'm in the business, you're in the business, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. So I would love to be part of one of those groups. That I think that the idea of multiple groups is good, so that they can report back to the larger group as a whole, and then the joint group.
Sounds good.
Well, thanks everyone who's participated. Holly, what should we do now?
Maybe, salvage was a big topic. What
Big.
other topics really were we thinking about diving more into?
I think maybe, I don't know how to put this, but maybe there's a way that we could start if somebody sees a house that needs to be put on this at this historic level or the highest level of preservation, like how does one go about that? Say you want to save one of the 3 bricks or something, or another building. How do you put that at the highest level do not touch category.
Well, with all due respect, the HTC has the authority to say no.
Yeah.
So you really and truly have the authority across the board. And again, that's why I've stressed that Nantucket is so unique. You know, there's only one other community, Beacon Hill, that has a special act. Everybody else follows Chapter 40C. You guys are here, they're down here, really. And I say that with all due respect. So there is a level, and again, this is where the surveys are important. There is a level of really grasping the difference between what building with Nantucket in mind indicates as an individual significant versus protected versus, you know, contributing. There are those levels. This is another reason why, you know, through our review processes of, say, for instance, historic tax credits. The Historical Commission reviews historic tax credits, and they have to review on significance as well as would we support this particular application moving forward. The HDC, though, you've been around 50 years longer than the Historical Commission, you all still review on significance, and that's where those historic determinations kick in. There are some maybe not policies, maybe policies and procedures that we could, you know, look into to what other jurisdictions do and maybe strengthen what we currently do. And that might go to your point, Abby, on what we could, you know, what the commission could do, what the commission's together as a CLG. CLG, you also have a lot of power at the state and federal level review. If anything comes in. So for instance, if Brant Point, you know, owned by the Coast Guard, decides to do some changes down there, you all as a CLG, your respective roles, but as a CLG, you also have some power there too. So there are some tool in the toolbox, and maybe just starting off with having with Jen at MHC do a work group, maybe. Now that you all are established as a CLG, a little bit unique. I have asked her on if there's special CLG training, not necessarily, but the trainings that have been provided. I know a couple of you have been. I try to share that with you as much as possible. Some of them are repetitive in nature, but it sounds like we're looking for uniqueness to Nantucket, and that might be beneficial for both commissions and the historic district.
Well, thank you for making me feel we have more power.
No, you do. You
Sometimes
do.
don't feel it, but thank you.
And I say that with all, you know, I do. And I probably am not the only one that says that or agrees, but yeah, you really and truly do. Our surveys, I think, are the first and foremost way of understanding what we have as resources, and then yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess it sounds like, Mr. Chairs, that this was a good discussion, and that I'll take this as to reach out to Jen Doherty as far as having her do a work group. Personally, I think that would be a higher level for both commissions. I think both commissions would benefit of hearing what she has to say. And then maybe going from there and doing these individual little micro level, as you were saying, tasks.
I would add one thing to the list, and that is the updating of the building with Nantucket in mind.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Now we've got building with Wisconsin in mind, but there are a lot of issues that weren't really issues when the last print was out. So we would certainly welcome any sort of teaming up on that subject.
I agree, Angus. I think that's a good point.
And on that note, just for both commissions take on building with Nantucket in mind, that's the guidebook for the HDC, and the Historical Commission have been recently talking about how they could help you all in educating the public on what are the things that you all see. For instance, I think a bunch of us could just list off a whole bunch of things, but additive massing, appropriate additive massing, your dormers appropriately cited on a building, things that are, I think you all have seen within the last 2 to 3 years, more so than probably any other years for the HDC, just because the amount of applications, but just re-educating the public based on the way building with Nantucket in mind is set now. And to Angus's point, yes, we all do know that there's sections in there. It could be codified, and that would probably require a task group. And obviously I would be a proponent on going through the procurement process and hiring a consultant to facilitate that at the proper time.
I'd like to add, Holly, that, and I've heard it from both commissions today, including streetscapes in perhaps an application. So you know what the environment, how the environment is being changed on the street.
That might be something the OFC to look at. Good topics.
I think we might have gotten to the witching hour for
I
Ray.
think so. Yep.
But Holly, thank you so much for putting this meeting together, and I appreciate all of you for showing up, and look forward to the good work ahead.
I think it's wonderful we've had this meeting with the two groups. But we can really work and be some important thing to for our construction of the island, and not destruction of the island. I think I am thrilled to have been part of it, and I think it's one of the most informative meetings we've had, don't you, Holly?
Very good. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. You're an inspiration.
Thank you, Diane. If there aren't any other topics to discuss, I would go ahead and take a motion for the NHC to close our meeting.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you both. Do we have Tom? Tom's
Nope.
gone. Okay, it's just me. I'm an I as well, so we'll close our meeting.
And
Thank you, everybody.
I'll
Awesome.
make a motion to adjourn the HDC.
thank you, Abby.
Aye.
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 Okay, and I'm an I. So I think Ray might have left. I don't know.
Yeah,
He did.
Okay.
We had a meeting at 3, so thank you, everybody. This has been great, and I will be sure to pass along the information that we saw from Will today. Thank you.
All of it was great. Thank you, Holly.
Sorry I
care.
missed that.
Thanks, Molly, and everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.